Alright, now that I am no longer having to make videos about tentacles, which I am very normal about, instead we can actually make a video about a new commander. But first, there's some fan art shown on the screen. This is all fan art from years past that needed a new place to get a second chance at life, so it's getting shown here. Hopefully you enjoy it. That all said, let's go ahead and talk about what we are planning on doing today. So I'm going to be doing a series of videos on a bunch of the commanders that were released during the March of the Machine event, because we got a bunch of commanders that were all basically two legendary creatures from across Magic's history teaming up to do a thing. And it turns out lots of them are dirt cheap, and because of the rapid rate that we get product these days, it turns out a lot of people seem to have forgotten about a lot of these commanders, or just I haven't seen them, because again, we get so many of them so rapidly now, it's very, very hard to keep up with what's even been out now. So I'm starting to revisit some of these guys, and this is the first one that came to mind to go ahead and do a video on. A couple of my friends were talking about this guy, and he looks so goddamn good. This is Goro Goro and Satoru. Now, Satoru I've already done a video on. He is the legendary creature that lets you ninjutsu anything from your hand. He's part of the Umezawa line, which was the line of people that originally killed Nicol Bolas and are basically cursed by him to always get fucked with by Bolas. You know that one comic where Thanos comes and screws with the one guy every single time he has a birthday? Yeah, that's what Bolas does to the Umezawa family. He basically goes, nah, these guys killed me once. That is never being forgiven. So I think they have a wonderful storyline that you should definitely check out. The Umezawas are pretty well represented in Magic's history. But Goro Goro and Satoru, this team up between a goblin and a human, has a weird mix of their abilities from their respective cards. Satoru's ninjutsu ability and Goro Goro his dragon summoning and haste abilities. So let's take a look and see what this commander is trying to do for us. It's a Grixis commander, 3/4, and every single time one of your creatures deals damage to an opponent, if it had just come out that turn, then you make a 5/5 red dragon spirit that has flying. And then you can pay 2 to get Goro Goro's ability of giving all your creatures you have haste. Now, one of the things I love about the design of this is very much a payoff for the ninjutsu ability, making sure that you spend the ninjutsu mana whenever a creature gets unblocked. You can put a new creature into play, and that gives you access to the triggered ability of this that makes a dragon. The dragon is, of course, the ability that Goro Goro could give you if you paid 5 mana into it, and the paying 2 mana to give all your creatures haste is an homage to Goro Goro's ability to pay 1 mana to give all your creatures haste. I love card design like this, where you try to take a watered down version of both commanders' abilities and sandwich them together to build something new. It really does create something that is more than just the sum of its parts. So I decided there's a couple of ways we can go about this. We can either build a ninjutsu deck, or we can build a rogue deck. Now, I don't mean rogue in the way that we built Rogue's Tribal for Mothman. I mean rogue in that we're going to go for the flying and unblockable creatures that we would for the Satoru Umezawa deck. And we're going to try to get the payoffs of the red dragon spirits, and we're going to try to abuse that payoff system as best we can. Now, I think we're going to have a very fun time here. But first, let's go into the ramp package. We don't plan on spending a lot of mana during this game, so we're going to actually have a weaker ramp package than normal. We're going to spend those resources elsewhere, beginning with Mirror Convert, a 2-mana dork, Sky Diamond, Trickle Diamond, and Fire Diamond. Of course, they are the diamond cycle that give us the mana colors we want. Wayfarer's Bauble, which can crack for one of the colors we need. Ornithopter of Paradise, and Arcane Signet, which can give us 1 mana of any color. And Honored Heirloom, which can give us 1 mana of any color. Now, the reason I chose these ones is because outside of the diamond cycle, these all tap for a mana of any color. There are no tap for colorless mana rocks here. No Mind Stones, no Fractured Power Stones. The reason they're not here is our commander costs 3 mana, and each of those mana pips is colored. We have no choice but to get these out now. So if we drop a colorless mana rock, we're not gaining anything from that mana rock, generally speaking. There is one other card that we have in here in the ramp section, though, and that is Genex's Astral Hunter. This is going to be one of our payoffs for summoning a ton of dragons. So, one of the strategies we're going to be going with is the ability to summon dragon tokens as our engine and then defend ourselves with instant cast removal spells. We're going to be very hit and hold, hit and hold. That is going to be our strategy. And Genex is perfect for that. Whenever it or another dragon, like the ones that Umezawa and Goro are going to push out, come onto the battlefield, you make an untapped treasure token, which will give us the mana we need to allow us to fight on our opponent's turns and protect ourselves. Because our commander is very susceptible to removal, and we have a very commander-centric strategy. And we need to be able to protect and defend that strategy. So to help with that as well, we have 2 cards to protect our commander, Mirror Shield and Giant's Amulet to give our commander Hexproof. Giant's Amulet only gives it the Hexproof so long as it's untapped, but we're never planning on swinging our commander, so this should end up working out for us just fine. And then we have the deck's draw engine. I've picked an 11-card, very, very strong and repeatable draw engine for this deck, along with a couple of single-use ones. Read the Bones and Feed the Infection and Ambitious Cost are some of our single-use sorcery speed ones. After that, most everything is either repeatable or instant speed. But these are all just generic, pay a certain amount of life, draw a certain amount of cards, type of cards. They are good filler draw for any deck you are playing, especially if you're running a budget deck like this, where you need to make sure the commander is $1 or less, and the deck itself is $15 or less in total. These will fill out your slots very well. On the instant speed draw, we have Factor Fiction and Hostile Negotiations. They're basically the same type of effect where you hand your opponent a bunch of cards, they pick between the cards, and then you get whatever they decided you get to keep, whether it's cards you know or whether it's cards you don't know. These are wonderful politicking pieces because if you know you're in a bad situation, you can hand a Factor Fiction pile. You give somebody the top 5 cards of your library, they separate them into 2 piles. That person, if they know they need you to annihilate an opponent who's on their way to winning the game, they might just hand you 5 cards in one pile and 0 cards in the other, so you can just pick the 5-card pile, and that will mean the Factor Fiction will always be in your favor. Likewise, if you know, because with Hostile Negotiations, you look at the top 3 cards of your library twice, put 1 face down and 1 face up, then hand those piles to an opponent. You know when you're handing these off to an opponent, if you can communicate with them in a politics way, like, hey, we got to kill this guy, so I'm handing you these piles. I'm handing you a face down pile so you and I know what's in it, but please hand me the face down pile and throw away the face up pile. You can do things like that if there is somebody else who is in the winning position at the table. Otherwise, they're just fun politicking pieces past that. Then we have Kaito Dancing Shadow. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you may bounce them to your hand and then activate one of Kaito's abilities again. He can make a creature unable to block or attack until your next turn. He can let you draw a card, or he can make a 2/2 colorless drone token that has Death Touch and a burn effect attached to it. Kaito is a wonderful piece of utility in our deck. He's a very strong draw engine, letting us draw 2 cards a turn as long as we are smacking our opponents with creatures, and he lets us bounce our unblockable creatures we're going to be playing back into our hands so that they will always be fresh creatures for our commander to see. And then we have Military Intelligence. When we attack with 2 or more creatures, draw a card. All our deck wants to do is get creatures on the ground and attack, so this will give us lots and lots of draw power. Indomitable, Bident of Thassa, and Reconnaissance Mission are all functionally the same card for us. Every time one of our creatures deal combat damage to a player, draw a card, with Bident of Thassa also giving us the ability to basically give a pseudo-goad effect if we need to make sure our opponent has no blockers up. The Indomitable being a vehicle we're probably never going to crew, and we can cast it from our graveyard if we have 3 or more pirates or vehicles, which you can take this deck in a pirate-y direction because some of the pirates will be the same CMC as our rogues, but generally speaking, you're not going to be going for that particular ability. Then we have the Idol of Oblivion. Draw a card, activate only if you have created a token on this turn. Ideally, we'll be creating a token on every single turn, so the Idol of Oblivion should always be able to keep our hand nice and healthy. But obviously, we got to get into the very important part of the deck, the most important section of the deck of all, the unblockable section. Now, if you are familiar with the Mothman deck that I made and the Satoru Umezawa deck that I made, this section is going to be very familiar. It's going to have some familiar faces in it, but the Lantern Bearer is in here as a nice 1 mana 1/1. This is the kind of stuff you want more than anything, and the reason for this is ideally our engine goes online on turn 4. So turn 3, our commander will come out. We don't have any way of ramping super quick, so our commander is almost always locked to a turn 3 play, which means most of our mana rocks are mana fixing cards in our deck. Turn 3, Goro Goro and Satoru come out, and then turn 4, we want to be dropping a Lantern Bearer style card on the board for 1 mana, and then spending the other 2 mana that we had, whether or not we get our 4th mana, on giving it haste so we can punch somebody and then generate that token with it, so that we can start the Dragon Engine going as fast as possible. To facilitate this, every single unblockable card in here is either 1 or 2 mana, unless there is some special exception we can make for it. So, Looter Ilkor is in here as well. Shadow, if it hits a creature, we get to loot. Blight Keeper, flying, and we can sack it to make a person lose 4 life, and we can gain 4 life in a pinch. Merfolk Spy, it's got unblockable against people who have islands. Everybody has a blue deck. Merfolk Spy is a 1 mana 1/1, and if it hits somebody, we can then get to look at a card in their hand, which can give us some information if somebody has tutored, for instance. Then we have Terramander, a 1 mana flying creature that we can place 8 into to adapt 4, which will give it 4/1/1 counters, and that ability costs less for every instant or sorcery in our graveyard, of which we have a grand total of 20. Most of the time, Terramander's not going to do this, but if we are in a pinch, we can just transform it into the Big Drake, giving us another pseudo-dragon to drop people's life down with. Then we have Batterfly Swarm, a 1 mana flying creature that can give itself Death Touch until end of turn, which makes it a very useful card for stopping another dragon player from smacking us in the schnoggin. Whirler Rogue is one of the exceptions to the mana cost that we are going for in the deck, because when it ETBs, we get 2 1/1 Thopter creature tokens. This can give us 2 triggers of our commander's ability, and it also allows us to turn our artifacts into an unblockable engine if we need them to be. So it is in here because we have extra utility we can do with it. Network Disruptor, another 1 mana creature that can also make a permanent get tapped when it comes out, so you can play this and tap an opponent's flying blocker so that you can get in for making dragons. Sturge can't block, but it doesn't matter because it's a 1/1 flyer, and we can also sack it to draw a card in a pinch. Merfolk Windrobber also lets us, whenever it hits somebody and deals combat damage to them, it makes them mill a card, which can help us a lot if somebody, say, casts a Vampiric Tutor. We can go ahead and just take the card off the top of their deck and ruin their game plan. Nightshade Stinger can't block, but it is a 1 mana flyer. Quickling is a 2 mana 2/2 that when it ETBs, sacrifice it unless we bounce a creature we control to our owner's hand. We want to be recycling our creatures, so this is a perfect ability. Lets us recycle one of our other 1 or 2 mana swingers, so it can swing on a new turn to be a new creature for Satoru and Goro Goro to see. Then we have Artificer's Assistant, a creature that is a 1 mana flyer that when you cast a historic spell, we get to scry 1. So if we're recasting our commander, we're on the back foot. This will give us the ability to dig into our deck a little bit. Fairy Miscreant, a flyer that is a 1/1. When it ETBs, if you have another creature named Fairy Miscreant, draw a card. This will only see application if we are playing clones in the deck, which generally speaking we won't do, but if you try to upgrade the deck with a Glasspool Mimic, this does give you a line of play. Vidalcan Infiltrator, 2 mana, can't be blocked, and it gets 1/0 as long as you have 3 or more artifacts. Very, very simple card, very easy to work. The only reason we are running it as a 2 mana card is like Looter Ilkor, it gives us the ability to smack somebody with unblockable as opposed to flying. Sometimes people have flying blockers, and we have to account for that. Silver Raven, when it ETBs, we get to scribe 1, which is another very, very easy effect for us to benefit from. It's also a 1/1 1 mana flyer. And then Thousand-Faced Shadow. This card is fantastic. It's a 1 mana 1/1 with flying, so it's already what our deck wants to do, but it's got ninjutsu. So if we are not in a position to get our haste stuff out, we can actually use the ninjutsu ability on this, drop it on the board, which means and the creature goes unblocked. We can throw it back to our hand with ninjutsu. When this enters the battlefield from our hand, if it's attacking, we make a token copy of any other attacking creature. This is almost always going to be one of our dragons. This is a way to get an extra dragon clone on the board to punch somebody in the face for more damage. There's only so many 5/5 dragons people can take before they run out of life total. And then we have Cavern Harpy. Oh my god, when I discovered this card, I was so freaking thrilled. A 2-mana 2/1 with flying, and when it comes into play, bounce any blue or black creature we control to our hand. That's all of our rogues. And we can pay 1 life to bounce it back to our hand. Do you know how good this card is in our deck? Cavern Harpy will always be a new creature on the board, and it will always allow you to recycle things like your Thousand Face Shadow or your Silver Raven Scry abilities. Like, you get to always reset those ETBs, and it is fantastic for that. And 1 life to bounce it to our hand, which lets it dodge any kind of removal, any kind of board wipe, anything, is great. Also, you can pay that 1 life multiple times in a single stack. So if somebody goes Lightning Bolt the Cavern Harpy, we can go pay 1 life, put it to hand. And if they go Path to Exile the Cavern Harpy at a higher point in the stack, we can just pay 1 life again and put it into our hand. The fact that it doesn't require us to have freed up mana works so well in our favor. This card is goddamn fantastic. But it's not just the rogues that we need to keep attention to. These flying and unblockable creatures that will give us the ability to trigger our commander are only one part of the conundrum. We also need the ability to hold up good cards on our opponent's turn to protect ourselves. And so we have a very, very thick 17-card removal and interaction package, beginning with Sinister Sabotage, countering a spell and letting us surveil 1. This is a deck that suffers very heavily from mana flooding. We do not want to get more than 4 or 5 mana in the early game because we want to have live cards. We need live cards for our commander. So Sinister Sabotage gives us the ability to counter a spell and then make sure the next card we have is live. Maestro's Charm gives us the option between looking at the top 5 cards of our library, putting 1 into our hand, the rest in the grave, or burning everybody for 3 and gaining us 3 in a pinch, or dealing 5 damage to a creature or planeswalker. Good removal, good finishing card, and also a fantastic way to make sure we can look for answers. Abrade kills a creature or an artifact. Feed the Swarm kills an enchantment or a creature. Soul Manipulation counters a creature spell and then bounces any creature card from our graveyard to our hand, which of course makes it easy to use this to get back things that Satora and Goro want. Negate counters any non-creature spell. Resculpt lets us eliminate an artifact or a creature. Dimir Charm lets us counter a sorcery spell or blow up a creature with power 2 or less, or look at the top 3 cards of somebody's library and put 1 into the top and keep it there, and the other into the graveyard. An easy way to respond to somebody's vampiric tutor. Grixis Charm lets us bounce a permanent to its owner's hand. Good synergy for our deck. We can give a creature -4/-4. It's a way to kill indestructible creatures. Or we can make all of our creatures get 2/0 until end of turn, which is a good way to finish our opponents off if we need just a little more damage from our dragon and unblockable swarm. Then we have Is It Charm, countering a non-creature spell unless an opponent pays 2, dealing 2 damage to any creature, or drawing 2 cards and discarding 2 cards. It's everything we could possibly want in a single spell. Then we have 5 Alarm Fire. Whenever any of our creatures deal combat damage, put a blaze counter on this card. We are a combat deck, so this is easy to facilitate. Then we can remove 5 blaze counters from it at any point and deal 5 damage to a creature or a player. It holds these counters for as long as we want, and it doesn't kill itself when we sacrifice them. This gives us an easy, repeatable way to snipe problems off the board at instant speed. Then we have Rankle and Torbrand, a creature that can trigger our commander's ability, of course, but it's got flying, first strike, haste. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player or a battle, either choose any number of these things, giving everybody a treasure, making everybody sack a creature, or if a source would deal damage to a person this turn, it deals that much damage plus 2 instead. Rankle and Torbrand has first strike. This means if we swing with a board filled with unblockable creatures and flyers, Rankle and Torbrand will hit somebody first. We can choose the if a source would deal damage to a person, deal that much damage plus 2, and then all of our unblockables and all of our dragons get that extra damage buff. That is an insane way to close out a game, and this card will need to be answered in any game we play with it. Then we have Rakdos Charm. Exile a person's grave, or blow up an artifact, or make a token player cry by making them lose 1 life for every single token they have. Or every creature deals a damage to its controller, but let's be honest, you're using this to keep the token player in line. Crossus Charm. return a permanent to its owner's hand, easy omni removal, but also can bounce our stuff in a pinch, destroy any non-black creature, so it's a Doomblade, or blowing up an artifact. All very, very good effects that the card has access to. Wash Away is a great counter spell that we can pay 1 to counter a commander or 3 to counter any type of spell. Warstorm Surge gives us the ability that anytime a creature ETBs, like our dragons that we'll be putting into the board constantly every turn, we deal damage equal to that card's power to any target. This is an easy way to dome somebody for game, or to make sure that our dragons are constantly keeping other people in check. We never want somebody to crack back on us after we've spawned dragons. This can make sure that creatures that are about to get up from summoning sickness stay down. Then we have the original Rankle Spankle, Master of Pranks. Flying, haste, so it works with our commander. And anytime it deals damage to a person, each player discards a card, and each player loses his life and draws a card, and each player sacks a creature. We are a token deck. It's easy to have these free creatures to sacrifice for this, so we can always make sure that people are kept in check with this kind of card, and the other removal that we are running in our deck to begin with. Then we have yet more ways to make sure that newly created creatures will punch people in the noggin with our Myriad set. Myriad creatures spawn a attacking creature for every opponent on the board and hits them with that creature. So they are newly created creatures every single time. Beginning with Tiamat's Fanatics, a 4/3 haster for 5 mana that has Myriad, which we can use to trigger our commander multiple times. Dalek Squadron, a menace, so it's got a little bit of evasion. A menace, Myriad, 3 mana, 3/3. Anytime it swings, make a bunch of Daleks, punch people in the face with them. Then we have the Brood Birth Viper. It's a 5 mana 3/3, but it has Myriad, and anytime the Viper or one of its created Vipers hits a player, we get to draw a card. It's a Myriad creature with a draw engine. Always swing the original one at an opponent who does not have access to a blocker, so that you can get a trigger of the commander, a trigger of the draw, and the 3/3s have to be chumped by a token or other useless card on our opponent's boards. Then we have to make sure that we are also keeping the board clean for ourselves. We need some board wipes. So I picked some board wipes that don't touch our commander at all. This is Blight Grenade. Blow up a creature, and then all creatures get -3/-3 until end of turn, which will not hit our commander, and it will not hit any of the dragon spirits that the commander is creating. Then we have Decree of Pain, which we can cycle to get rid of all little creatures. Again, not creatures our commander will care about too terribly much. Or we can cast it for 8 to blow up every creature, and then we get to draw a card for every creature that is destroyed this way, which gives us easy access to a way to survive if we are on the back foot, and we just need to get a fresh new hand and a fresh start on a clean slate field. But we still need to make sure that we are closing out the game, and sometimes 5/5 dragons will not do it on their own. So we have 2 ways to increase our win chances. First of all is Dragon Cultist. At the end step, if any source we have dealt 5 or more damage this turn, so our dragons that we create with our commander's ability, this will create another 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. This basically doubles the amount of tokens we get to spawn that are all big, beefy 4/4 dragons. Then we have Shared Animosity. Anytime a creature we control attacks, it gets 1/0 until end of turn for every other attacking creature that shares a creature type with it. Oh boy, if you have 5 dragons on the board, giving them +5/+0 is a bit overkill. But there's no overkill quite like overkill, so just run it anyway. Shared Animosity, how the hell did you become a budget card? I adore this thing. But you still need to make sure that your deck has a reasonable land base. So let's go over that real quick. We have 8 islands, 5 swamps, and 4 mountains as our basic lands due to our deck spread. And then in our dual land section, we have a Frostboil Snarl as a reveal land. We have Foreboding Ruins as another reveal land. Then we have Darkwater Catacombs, Shadowblood Ridge as 2 of our lands that come into play and give us a filter ability. We would like to run the new filter land that came out for Izzet, but we do have to keep to our deck's budget, so it's not ran in here. Then we have Smoldering Marsh and Sunken Hollow as ways to give us access to typed untapped lands. Choked Estuary is another reveal land, and Fetid Pools is another typed land that can cycle itself so that we can replace it with a new card. because our deck is, again, very, very susceptible to being mana flooded. We want to make sure that once we are established, once we have, 4 or 5 lands, we're not getting more lands if we don't need them. Then we have the fetching land section, 7 of these. Shire Terrace, Grixis Panorama, and Promising Veins are all basically the same land. They can get us any of the basic land colors we want while being untapped lands. Terramorphic Expanse, Escape Tunnel, and Evolving Wilds are all easy access to our basic lands, but they come into play tapped. And then Ash Barrens has basic land cycling while being an untapped land otherwise. Leading us to the final cards, which are our Omni lands, Command Tower, Crypt of the Eternals, and Exotic Orchard. Crypt of the Eternals is in here because it gives us a life when it comes into play, and it lets us filter our mana if we need to, while being an untapped land in every other situation. Our commander is very susceptible to getting us screwed because it needs every single color type, and we are a budget deck, which means we have to be very, very careful on our mulligans to make sure our commander can come out on curve. So lands like this are incredibly helpful. They allow us to play the land, and then on turn 2, play a ramp spell, and then on turn 3, no matter what colors we have out at that point, we can just tap basically 4 mana's worth of stuff to generate 3 mana, which will be used to summon Goro Goro and Satoru, fixing our mana for us. So untapped filter land, not the worst thing in the world for a deck like this. And with that, that is Satoru and Goro Goro, a deck that I think you will have a hell of a fun time with. But here's a problem. We gotta talk about upgrades. And really, the main part of the deck that needs to be upgraded, if you are upgrading this, is to take the Diamond Cycle out and swap it out with the Talisman Cycle. The Talismans will give you easy access to better mana fixing, and that will help the deck more than anything. That will fix the deck in more ways than you can think. As for removal and interaction, we're actually running some of the best in every single category here already. Wash Away is a fantastic counterspell. Going up to a regular counterspell in here as well would not hurt. Take your pick of what comes out for that, but a lot of the stuff in here, like Warstorm Surge, 5-Alarm Fire, I would be keeping in anyway, because unlike cards like Impact Tremors, these have extra utility as removal. But just keep an eye on your local meta and make sure that if you need a certain kind of removal and you need more of it, there's nothing wrong with modifying the removal package to get that kind of removal. A Prismari command would actually do really well in the removal section. As for the unblockable creatures, it's really hard to move away from what we have here, because 1 mana 1/1 evasion is basically sex in this deck. That's what the deck wants to have to begin with. So pick your favorite flavors, or trade out some of the less efficient versions of these cards and put in some more ninjas, like Thousand Face Statue. That gives you more access to that, comes into play immediately, unblockable type of effect. That one is just a flavor choice on your part. As for WinCon stuff, Shared Animosity and Dragon Cultist are giving us what we want already, but an Akroma's Memorial would do really well here, guaranteeing that all of our cards have protection from various colors, giving them vigilance, giving them haste already without having to spend the extra mana on our commander's ability. That would not hurt you in any way, shape, or form in this deck. And then, of course, the mana base. You already know, I've done a mana guide on how to build your deck. Just eat into your basic lands and get more non-tapped dual lands as you go. I don't need to explain that your mana base will always need to be cleaned up first when you are making a non-budget version of a budget deck. The Protection Suite, the Giant's Amulet, and the Mirror Shield can either be supplemented or replaced with Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves. Both of those will do you a good job. As you're upgrading the deck, you could put in a Sword of Selves as another one of these Myriad cards. The Sword of Selves will actually make it to where your already unblockable creatures have Myriad, which will give you more utility from your Myriad creatures. You can also just make one of your dragons have Myriad, which will give you extra synergies with cards like your Shared Animosity, so that will help you as well. As you are upgrading the draw package, the Feed the Swarm and Ambitions cost and Read the Bones should be traded out for instant speed cards, or cards like, say, Coastal Piracy that will give you more access to swinging and drawing effects in the deck. You also could put in the third Fact or Fiction style card that is black and blue from Lord of the Rings. I believe it's is it Tempted by the Ring? I don't remember the exact name of it, but I would put that in here as well. You also could add Original Kaito in here if you wanted, as a flavor win, if you so chose. The original Goro Goro and the original Satoru Umezawa can also fit in here. Goro Goro is another dragon spawner, and the original Umezawa as another way to get, if you decided to take the deck in a more ninjutsu direction, the original Umezawa will give you access to free ninjutsu on all of your cards, which is good. And then as for the board wipes, I like Blight Grenade and Decree of Pain a lot in the deck, but in the original build, I actually had a Necromantic selection as well because it kept the commander up. I cut it for another card because the selection does kill our dragon tokens, and I kept the ones that do not do that. So on that note, a Toxic Deluge would be very good here because we can choose how much life we pay into a Toxic Deluge to make sure that we are not screwing ourselves on the destruction. And with that, that is everything about Goro Goro and Satoru. A wonderful Grixis commander, well-typed, well-designed, gives all of our creatures hastes, makes Dragon Spirit tokens. It just does everything we want a nice, aggressive deck to do. And because our deck is such a low-to-the-curve deck, this is a super good beginner-friendly deck for you as well, if you are newer to Magic, because it has such a low curve at 2.66. The curve of the deck allows you to play stuff very, very early and keep playing cards. You're usually not going to have a dead hand in this deck because the curve is so low, and our bell curve is set so aggressive. Just don't be afraid to swing out at people with this deck to make sure that it can hit its mark, because you need to make enemies with this deck in order to generate value. And that sounds bad, but it's not. It's really not. It's okay to attack players at a table with a deck that needs cards attacking all the time. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. I'm going to go take a drink because my throat is drying out because somehow I'm still sick and I'm apparently not better yet. And that's very, very upsetting. But, you know, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Thank you all for subscribing so far. And as always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here.
Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability that Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Blitzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, Sagitt, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.